Admiral James Walker stood at the command center of the Alliance flagship Guardian, his weathered face reflecting the red emergency lights that bathed the bridge in an ominous glow. The massive holographic display before him showed the grim reality. Over 2,000 swarm vessels approaching the Centauri Gulf, their formation resembling a massive cloud of locusts ready to devour everything in their path. Status report. Walker commanded, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. Sir, the swarm fleet will reach our defensive line in 43 minutes, First Officer Tom reported, his fingers dancing across the tactical display. Our remaining fleet of 200 ships is in position, but he hesitated, then added quietly, simulations give us less than a 2% chance of holding the line. Walker nodded slowly. He'd expected those numbers, but hearing them still felt like a punch to the gut. The Centauri Belt was their last major stronghold, home to over 12 billion Alliance citizens from 30 different species. If it fell, the Alliance would effectively cease to exist as a unified force in the galaxy. The past 3 years had been a constant retreat. The Swarm, a hive mind species that emerged from the unknown regions of space, had systematically consumed every world in their path. They didn't negotiate. They didn't take prisoners. They simply arrived, overwhelmed all resistance with their superior numbers, and absorbed all resources, organic and inorganic, into their collective. Show me the civilian evacuation progress, Walker ordered, turning to another screen. The statistics weren't encouraging. Even with every available transport running at maximum capacity, they'd only managed to evacuate 30% of the population. They needed more time, but time was the one resource they couldn't manufacture. Sir, a young communications officer called out, her voice trembling slightly. We're receiving distress signals from the outer colonies. The swarm is. They're not just approaching from the front. They're emerging from multiple vectors. Walker's jaw tightened as new red dots appeared on the tactical display. The swarm had somehow managed to flank their position, jumping in from unexpected directions. Their 200 ships now faced attacks from 3 different directions. They're hurting us, Walker realized aloud, like cattle to the slaughter. He watched as the tactical computer recalculated their odds of success. The number dropped to 0.8%. Walker took a deep breath and pressed the fleet-wide communication button. His voice would reach every Alliance ship in the system. All ships, this is Admiral Walker. You all know what we face. You know the odds. He paused, looking at the faces of his bridge crew. But what you might not know is that behind us are 12 billion souls. Mothers, fathers, children, all counting on us to buy them time. The swarm thinks we're prey that will break and run. But we are the Alliance. We stand together, we fight together, and if necessary, we die together. The response was immediate. Ships began reporting in, their captains' voices firm with determination. They knew this was likely their last stand, but they would make it count. Battle formations, Walker commanded. Cruisers form up in delta pattern. Destroyers, take flanking positions. All civilian ships are to continue evacuation procedures at maximum speed. He turned to his weapons officer. Arm everything we have. Today, we don't save ammunition for the trip home. The Alliance ships moved into position, their formations tight and disciplined. On the massive view screen, the swarm continued their approach, their numbers seeming to blot out the stars themselves. Sir, Tom reported, enemy will enter weapons range in 5 minutes. Walker nodded, his eyes fixed on the approaching armada. In all his years of service, he'd never faced such overwhelming odds. But he'd also never been more certain of his duty. They would hold this line, buy time for the evacuations, even if it cost them everything. All ships, he commanded, prepare to engage. The next 5 minutes passed in tense silence, broken only by the steady countdown from the tactical officer. The swarm drew closer, their massive fleet now visible to the naked eye through the bridge windows, a dark cloud promising death and destruction. Walker's hand tightened on the railing of his command station. For the Alliance, he whispered. All ships, weapons free. The first wave of swarm fighters crashed against the Alliance defense line like waves against rocks. Admiral Walker watched as his ship's point defense systems lit up space with countless energy beams, destroying hundreds of the smaller enemy craft. Status report, he called out, gripping his command chair as the Guardian shook from a near miss. Shields holding at 70%, Tom responded, his fingers flying across his console. We've destroyed approximately 200 enemy fighters, but their capital ships are still advancing. Walker nodded grimly. The swarm always sent their fighters first, expendable pawns to test defenses and wear down shields. The real threat would come next. Sir, the communications officer suddenly straightened in her chair. I'm picking up an encrypted transmission. It's not using any known alliance or swarm frequencies. Walker frowned. Source, unknown, sir. It's coming from somewhere beyond the outer system, but the signal strength is impossibly clear for that distance. Put it through. The bridge speakers crackled to life with a message that made everyone freeze. Hold position. Human fleet approaching. We will handle this. For several seconds, only the distant sounds of battle could be heard on the bridge. Walker broke the silence first. What do we know about humans? His science officer shook his head. Almost nothing, sir. They're listed in ancient records as a species that achieved spaceflight, then simply disappeared. No contact with any Alliance species for over 500 years. Another blast rocked the ship. The tactical display showed the swarm capital ships moving into attack formation. Sir, Tom reported, we've lost the destroyer Phoenix. The swarm is pressing hard on our left flank. Walker faced a decision that would determine the fate of billions. Trust an unknown message from a mysterious species or continue with their likely suicidal defense. He pressed the fleet-wide comm button. All ships, adjust tactics. Focus on defensive formations. Conserve ammunition and shield power. Buy us time. Time for what, sir? Tom asked quietly. For help to arrive, Walker replied, hoping he wasn't making a terrible mistake. The next 10 minutes were the longest of Walker's life. His fleet executed a fighting retreat, giving ground slowly while maintaining their defensive screen. They lost 6 more ships, but managed to inflict significant damage on the swarm's advance forces. Then the sensors officer shouted, multiple quantum signatures detected, massive energy readings at the system's edge. The main view screen shifted to show a section of seemingly empty space. Suddenly, the vacuum itself seemed to ripple, as if reality was being gently pushed aside. Through these distortions came ships, dozens, then hundreds of them. They were unlike anything Walker had ever seen. Their hulls were midnight black, absorbing rather than reflecting light. They moved with impossible grace, as if they were immune to the normal laws of inertia. Each ship was shaped like an arrowhead, with strange geometric patterns pulsing along their hulls. Count, Walker asked, his voice barely above a whisper. 347 vessels, sir. They're forming up into an attack formation I've never seen before. The communications officer spoke up again. New transmission, sir. Same source. This time, the message was longer. Alliance Fleet Command, this is Human Fleet Commander Stone. Please maintain your current defensive position and do not advance. We have analyzed the swarm's tactical patterns and capabilities. Combat operations will commence in 30 seconds. Be advised that our weapon systems may interfere with your sensors. This is not cause for concern. Walker watched as the human ships moved into position. They didn't rush, didn't show any sign of concern about the massive swarm fleet bearing down on them. They simply flowed into formation with mechanical precision. Sir, Tom asked, do we trust them? Walker looked at the tactical display one more time, his battered fleet of barely surviving ships against the overwhelming swarm armada. Then he looked at these newcomers, these humans who had appeared from nowhere with technology that seemed to defy physics itself. We trust them, he said firmly, because right now, They're the only hope we have. The bridge of the Guardian fell silent as the human ships began to move. Their formation was unlike anything in Alliance military doctrine. A complex, three-dimensional pattern that seemed to flow like water through space. Receiving visual transmission from the human command ship, the communications officer announced. They're requesting to put it on the main screen. Walker nodded. The screen flickered, and he found himself looking at a human for the first time in recorded history. Commander Stone stood at what appeared to be the center of a circular bridge. She wore a simple black uniform with silver geometric patterns that matched the designs on their ships. Her short gray hair and steady gaze spoke of experience, but it was her calm that struck Walker most. She looked like someone about to take a pleasant walk, not engage in a battle against overwhelming odds. "Admiral Walker," she said, her voice clear and steady. "With your permission, we'll demonstrate our capabilities. Please ensure your ships maintain their current positions. The physics distortions from our weapons can be unsettling to the uninitiated." Before Walker could respond, the tactical officer called out, "Swarm Fleet is launching their main attack. Multiple capital ships advancing." On the screen, Stone simply nodded. "Very well. Beginning demonstration." The human ships suddenly lit up with patterns of blue light racing along their hulls. Small ports opened along their sides, revealing what looked like mirrors or prisms rather than conventional weapons. "Energy spike," the science officer shouted. "Sir, these readings can't be right. The energy output is beyond anything our sensors can measure." The human ships fired. There was no beam of light, no visible projectile. Instead, space itself seemed to twist between their ships and the swarm fleet. Hundreds of tiny distortions appeared, each no bigger than a small shuttle. The effect on the swarm ships was immediate and devastating. Where the distortions touched, matter simply ceased to exist. Clean, circular holes appeared in swarm vessels as if someone had used a cookie cutter on their hulls. There was no explosion, no debris. The affected areas simply vanished. "Dear stars," Tom whispered, "they're using controlled quantum deletion. They're not destroying matter. They're removing it from existence." The swarm, for the first time in known history, showed hesitation. Their perfect formation wavered as ships tried to avoid the areas where space itself seemed to be coming apart. Commander Stone's voice came through again, still eerily calm. "Initiating Phase 2. Admiral Walker, you may notice some temporal distortion on your sensors. This is normal." The human ships shifted formation slightly, and now crystalline structures extended from their bows. The space around the swarm fleet suddenly took on a strange, honey-like quality. Their ships began moving slower and slower, as if swimming through thick syrup. "They're manipulating time itself," the science officer said in awe, "creating localized fields of temporal dilation. The swarm ships are experiencing time thousands of times slower than we are." With the swarm fleet nearly frozen in space, the humans methodically began removing them from existence, ship by ship. It wasn't a battle anymore, it was surgery. Walker watched in stunned silence. His entire career, he'd fought the swarm. He'd seen them overwhelm every defense, adapt to every weapon, survive every strategy. Now they were being eliminated with the casual ease of someone cleaning a window. "Admiral," Stone spoke again, "we've eliminated 30% of the swarm fleet. At current efficiency rates, we'll have the situation resolved in approximately 15 minutes. Would you like a more detailed briefing while we work?" Walker looked at his bridge crew, saw the same mix of awe and relief on their faces that he felt himself. Humanity hadn't just returned. They'd returned with power that bordered on the divine. "Yes, Commander," he managed to say. "I believe we'd all like to know where you've been, and what exactly we're witnessing." Stone actually smiled slightly. "It's quite a story, Admiral, and I think you'll find the next few minutes very educational." As the human fleet continued their methodical destruction of the swarm, Commander Stone's image remained on the Guardian's main screen. She gestured, and a holographic display appeared between her and Walker, showing complex diagrams of the human ship's systems. "You see, Admiral," she explained, "what you're witnessing isn't just advanced technology. It's the result of 500 years of focused evolution in our understanding of space, time, and gravity." Walker watched as another group of swarm ships simply winked out of existence. "Your weapons, they violate every law of physics we know." Stone smiled. "No, they follow the laws of physics perfectly. You're just familiar with a more limited version of those laws." She paused as her fleet executed another perfect formation change. "For example, your ships use energy shields to deflect attacks. We found it more efficient to simply prevent attacks from existing in our spacetime." As if to demonstrate, a desperate group of swarm fighters launched a suicide run at one of the human vessels. Before they could impact, the space around the human ship seemed to ripple. The fighters didn't explode or break apart. They simply never reached their target, as if they'd tried to fly through a dream. "Dimensional shifting," the Guardian's science officer breathed. "They're partially phasing their ships out of our reality." "Correct," Stone nodded, "though that's a significant simplification. We actually maintain our ships in 17 different dimensional states simultaneously. It makes us rather hard to hit." Tom, who had been studying the tactical display, spoke up. "Commander, your ships aren't using any thrusters or conventional engines. How are you maintaining such precise formations?" "Gravity manipulation," Stone replied. "Every human ship generates its own localized gravity field. Space isn't something we move through. It's something we bend to our will." She gestured, and the holographic display showed the complex web of gravitational fields the human fleet was generating. "We can create paths of curved space that let us move in any direction we choose." Walker watched as the display showed what looked like a tangled web of light between the human ships. Each vessel sat at the intersection of multiple gravity lines, using them like a spider uses its web. "And your targeting systems?" he asked. "They're tracking and hitting targets faster than any AI we've ever developed." "That's because we don't use AI," Stone explained. "At least, not in the way you understand it. Our ships are controlled by quantum consciousness matrices, systems that exist in a state of simultaneous possibility until the moment of decision. They don't need to think or calculate because they already know every possible outcome." The battle, if it could still be called that, continued around them. The remaining swarm ships were now trying to retreat, but they found themselves trapped in pockets of distorted spacetime, like flies in amber. "But how did you develop all this?" Walker asked. "Why disappear for 500 years?" Stone's expression grew serious. "Because we knew what was coming. Our long-range quantum sensors detected the swarm 200 years before they reached Alliance space. We knew conventional weapons and tactics would be useless against them. So we took the long view." She waved her hand, and a holographic display showed the history of human technological development. "We turned our entire civilization toward a single goal, developing technology that would make us not just superior to the swarm, but so far beyond them that victory would be absolute. Every discovery, every breakthrough was focused on this moment." The display showed the last group of swarm ships attempting to make a faster-than-light jump to escape. The human ships simply reached out with beams of twisted space, pulling them back like fish caught on lines. "Of course," Stone added, almost casually, "what you're seeing now is just a small demonstration. We thought it best not to show our full capabilities just yet. We wouldn't want to cause too much concern." Walker stared at her, then at the devastation her fleet had already caused. If this wasn't their full capability, what else were they capable of? As if reading his thoughts, Stone smiled again. "Don't worry, Admiral. The interesting part is yet to come." Time seemed to slow on the Guardian's bridge as the human fleet began their final attack run. The remaining swarm ships, still nearly 2,000 strong, had clustered together in a defensive formation that had proven unbeatable against countless alien races. Commander Stone's voice carried a hint of satisfaction. "Now, Admiral Walker, Let us show you why the swarm's hive mind tactics are their greatest weakness. The human ships split into three distinct groups. The first spread out in a sphere around the swarm fleet, their hulls pulsing with deep purple light. The second group formed a tight grid pattern above the battlefield, while the third positioned themselves below. Energy readings off the scale, the science officer reported. They're generating some kind of field around the entire swarm fleet. Stone nodded. Quantum entanglement web. Admiral. Since they think as one, we'll defeat them as one. The purple light from the human ships suddenly connected, forming a perfect sphere of energy around the swarm fleet. Inside the sphere, the swarm ships began to move erratically, as if their perfect coordination was breaking down. Their hive-mind connection is being disrupted, Stone explained. The field creates quantum interference in their communication network. Right now, for the first time in their existence, they're experiencing something entirely new: isolation. Walker watched in amazement as the mighty swarm fleet, known for its perfect synchronized movements, began to fall into chaos. Ships collided with each other. Formations broke apart, and their once coordinated attacks became random and desperate. Second phase, Stone announced calmly. The human ships in the grid formation above activated their weapons, but instead of firing at the swarm ships, they fired at each other. Beams of white light connected the human vessels in a complex geometric pattern. What you're about to see, Stone said, is why we spent 50 years studying crystal formation mathematics. The grid of light beams suddenly refracted downward, splitting into thousands of smaller beams. Where each beam struck a swarm ship, it didn't destroy it. Instead, it transformed it. The organic metal hulls of the swarm vessels began to crystallize, spreading like frost on a window. We're not destroying them, Stone explained. We're changing their molecular structure. Their hulls, weapons, and organic components are being reformed into inert crystalline structures. Within minutes, hundreds of swarm ships hung motionless in space, transformed into beautiful but lifeless crystal sculptures. The remaining ships tried to escape, but the human vessels below had created a gravity well that trapped them in place. Final phase, Stone announced. Admiral, you might want to adjust your viewers' light sensitivity. The human ships suddenly released what looked like waves of pure darkness. Where these waves touched the crystallized swarm ships, the structures simply shattered into billions of tiny fragments. The fragments themselves then broke down further until they simply ceased to exist. Complete molecular dissolution, Stone said. No debris, no scattered radiation, no biological remnants that could potentially regenerate. Total cleanup. Walker checked the battle clock. 19 minutes had passed since the humans had begun their attack. In that time, they had completely eliminated a swarm fleet that had terrorized the galaxy for years. Not a single human ship showed even minor damage. Commander, Walker said, his voice thick with emotion, I don't know how to thank you. Stone's expression softened slightly. No thanks needed, Admiral. We've been preparing for this day for centuries. Though I should mention, she paused, looking at something off-screen. This was just one swarm fleet. Our other battle groups are currently engaging swarm forces in 27 other sectors. Total victory is expected within the hour. The bridge crew of the Guardian stared in stunned silence. 27 other sectors. Other battle groups. Just how large was the human fleet? Stone smiled at their reaction. Perhaps now would be a good time to discuss the future, Admiral. Because after today, everything changes. 2 hours after the battle, Admiral Walker found himself aboard the human flagship, Stellar Dawn. The ship's conference room was unlike anything he'd seen before. The walls seemed to shift between solid and transparent, offering views of space that made him feel like he was floating among the stars. Commander Stone sat across from him, along with several other human officers. The holographic display between them showed a map of the entire galaxy, with pulsing red dots marking swarm territories and blue dots showing human fleet positions. 500 years ago, Stone began, humanity made a choice. We detected the swarm's approach long before anyone else, thanks to our quantum scanning technology. We knew we had two options: warn the galaxy and fight alongside them with current technology, or withdraw and prepare properly. She gestured at the map, which shifted to show Earth and its surrounding systems. We chose isolation, not out of fear or selfishness, but because we calculated that joining the galaxy then would have led to defeat. The swarm would have adapted to our technology too quickly. "But you watched us," Walker said, not as an accusation, but as a realization. "All these years, you were watching as the swarm consumed world after world." Stone nodded solemnly. Every defeat, every loss was recorded and analyzed. We studied how the swarm adapted, how they fought, how they thought. It wasn't easy, watching civilizations fall while we prepared. But we knew that acting too soon would doom everyone. The map changed again, showing the human sphere of influence. It was vast, far larger than Walker had imagined. We didn't just hide. Stone continued. We expanded inward instead of outward, building layers of civilization in pocket dimensions and artificial spaces. We developed technology that didn't just surpass the swarm, but operated on principles they couldn't comprehend, let alone adapt to. One of the other human officers, an older man with kind eyes, spoke up. "We also made sure we were ready in other ways. Our society, our military, our industry. Everything was built around the principle of responsible power. We knew that when we returned, we would wield forces that could reshape reality itself. We had to be absolutely certain we would use that power wisely." Walker looked at the casualty reports from the day's battles. In every engagement, human forces had achieved total victory without a single loss. And now, what happens to the galaxy now? Stone smiled warmly. "Now we help rebuild, but carefully. We won't simply hand over our most advanced technology. That would be irresponsible. Instead, we'll help each civilization advance at a pace they can handle safely. We'll protect, guide, and support, but never dominate." The display showed new trade routes, defense patterns, and development plans. The humans had literally thought of everything, planned for every possibility. "Think of us as guardians," Stone explained. "We'll maintain watch over the galaxy, intervene when necessary, but allow civilizations to grow and develop on their own paths. We have the power to rule everything, but we choose to serve instead." Walker thought about the implications. The Alliance Council will have questions. Some will be afraid of your power. Of course, Stone agreed. Fear is natural when faced with something so far beyond your understanding. But we've had centuries to learn patience. We'll prove ourselves through actions, not words. She stood and walked to the window, which now showed Earth in all its beauty. Humanity withdrew from the galaxy to become what it needed. Not conquerors, not rulers, but protectors. We have the power to destroy solar systems, but we choose to preserve them. We can bend space and time, but we use that power to save lives, not take them. Looking back at Walker, she added, "The galaxy needs time to heal, to rebuild, to grow. And for the first time in centuries, thanks to humanity's return, it will have that time." Walker understood then what humanity had become, not just powerful beyond imagination, but wise enough to use that power responsibly. The fear he had felt earlier was gone, replaced by hope for the future. 1 month after the Battle of Centauri Belt, Admiral Walker stood at the podium in the Alliance Grand Chamber. Representatives from over 200 species filled the vast hall, their excited whispers creating a constant background hum. At the back of the chamber, a delegation of humans sat quietly, their simple black uniforms standing out among the colorful diplomatic attire of other species. "Friends, allies, fellow survivors," Walker began, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. 1 month ago, we faced extinction. The swarm had pushed us to the edge of known space, and hope seemed lost. He paused, looking at the assembled faces. Then humanity returned. The chamber's main display activated, showing footage from the battles. The human ships moving with impossible grace, their weapons reshaping reality itself. The swarm's complete defeat played out in high-resolution detail. Many of you have asked why they waited so long to help. Walker continued, why they watched as we fought and died. I'd spent the past month working closely with them, and now I understand. He gestured to the human delegation. They didn't wait because they were afraid. They waited because they wanted to save everyone, not just delay the inevitable. Commander Stone stood and walked to the podium at Walker's gesture. The chamber fell silent. This was the first time most species had seen a human in person. The galaxy stands at a crossroads, Stone said, her calm voice filling the chamber. The swarm is gone, completely eliminated from every sector of known space. Now we must decide how to move forward. The holographic display changed, showing new trade routes, defense stations, and development plans. Humanity offers not domination, but partnership. We will share our technology gradually, ensuring each species can develop safely and responsibly. Our fleets will protect your borders. Our scientists will help solve your world's problems, but we will not rule you. A representative from a world that had been nearly destroyed by the swarm stood up. And what guarantee do we have that you won't become the new swarm? Your power is beyond anything we can comprehend. Stone's response was simple yet powerful. Look at what we've already done. We could have conquered the galaxy centuries ago. Instead, we spent 500 years preparing to save it. Judge us by our actions, not our capabilities. Walker watched as understanding spread through the chamber. Humanity had proven itself not through words, but through choices. They had the power to rule everything, yet chose to protect. They could demand anything, yet offered partnership. The display showed the human ships now positioned throughout the galaxy, maintaining peace but never interfering unless asked. Their black ships had become symbols not of fear, but of safety. The age of constant war is over, Stone announced. The age of cooperation begins. We offer you something the galaxy has never truly known before. Sustainable peace, protected by a power that cannot be challenged, yet chooses to serve. One by one, the representatives stood. The vote was unanimous. Acceptance of humanity's offer of protection and guidance. As the chamber erupted in celebration, Walker found himself thinking about how much had changed. Just a month ago, he had been preparing for a last stand. Now he was helping to build a future brighter than anyone had imagined possible. Quite a change, isn't it? Stone asked, joining him at the chamber's observation window. Outside, ships from 100 species flew peacefully past a patrolling human vessel. I still have trouble believing it sometimes, Walker admitted. Your power, your technology, your choices. Stone smiled, watching the ships pass by. The true measure of power isn't in having it, she said quietly, but in how you choose to use it. Humanity learned that lesson over centuries of preparation. Now we can teach it to others. As the sun set on the Alliance capital world, its light reflected off the sleek hulls of human ships standing guard in high orbit. They were silent guardians, powerful beyond measure, yet dedicated to preservation rather than dominion. The galaxy had entered a new era, one where humanity's return marked not an ending, but a beginning. The age of the swarm was over. The age of protected peace had begun.